Throughout the Cold War, tensions between the superpowers, the Soviet Union and the United States were at an all-time high. But in the 1970s, a significant shift occurred, leading to a breakthrough in their relations. This period was known as Détente. Today we're going to be looking at the reasons for Détente, along with the treaties and their consequences. Hi there and welcome to The History Teacher. This revision video covers superpower relations and the Cold War, 1941 to 1991, from the GCSE Edexcel 9-1 course. Hopefully you'll also find it useful if you're studying any of the other exam boards, or if, like me, you just love history. There are a number of reasons for the change in attitude in the 1970s. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 had heightened concerns about the dangers of a nuclear war, leading both superpowers to recognise the need for negotiation and compromise to avoid a mutually assured destruction. Secondly, the economic burdens of the arms race and the Vietnam War was unsustainable for both the United States and the Soviet Union, and that meant that both sides needed to reduce their spending on defence. At the end of the 1960s, both superpowers had a change of leadership. The new leader of the United States, Richard Nixon, and the Soviet Union leader, Leonid Brezhnev, were more willing to engage in diplomatic negotiations and seek areas of common interest. This shift in leadership and a more realistic outlook caused by affairs at home and abroad played a significant role in the development of Détente. Finally, there was now a desire for stability in Europe. Both superpowers recognised the need for stability in Europe following decades of unrest and sought to ease tensions between Western-aligned and Soviet bloc nations. This led to improved relations and cooperation in areas such as trade, diplomacy and in arms control. The first major conference of the Détente period was SALT I, or the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks. It was the first round of negotiations and treaties between the United States and the Soviet Union, and was aimed at reducing the number of long-range ballistic missiles that each side could possess and manufacture. The talks began in 1969 under President Nixon, and the first treaty, known as SALT I, was signed on May 26, 1972. The key points of SALT I included limiting the number of ballistic missiles for each side and limiting the number of missile deployment sites. There were some major positive outcomes of SALT I. Firstly, it was the first time during the Cold War that the United States and the Soviet Union had agreed to limit the number of nuclear missiles in their own arsenals. This was seen as a significant achievement in the context of the ongoing arms race between the two superpowers. Another important outcome of SALT I was the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, or ABM, which limited strategic missile defences to 200 each and allowed each side to construct 2 missile defence sites. Finally, the Interim Agreement on Strategic Offensive Arms set limits on the number of intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, SLBMs, and long-range bombers that each side could possess. Despite this, it did have some limitations. It did not, for example, prevent the enlargement of forces using more modern nuclear technology, and checking each side was actually complying with the treaty's agreement was a problem. Next up were the Helsinki Accords, held in Finland in 1975 and attended by 35 countries. The Helsinki Accords were primarily an effort to reduce tension between the Soviet and Western blocs. The agreements were split into 3 baskets. Basket 1. The current borders of European countries could not be changed or threatened by force. In other words, the borders were now fixed. You will remember that the West previously did not accept the existence of East Germany, and the USSR did not accept the existence of West Germany. The Helsinki Accords now agreed the existence of the two countries and set their border. Basket 2 was cooperation in economic, scientific, humanitarian, and other areas. This is probably the most successful of the baskets. It led to the Apollo-Soyuz mission, which was a joint space mission by the USA and the USSR later the same year. Basket 3 was respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, including freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief. Whilst this was agreed to by all of the attending nations, it does seem clear that the USSR had no intention of sticking to this agreement. The Helsinki Accords were non-binding and they did not have treaty status, but they did show some willingness to work together and make concessions. Although the USA had its doubts about the USSR's human rights commitment, the USSR saw Basket 1 as a victory, because it had been trying to get the West to recognise East Germany as a country since the 1950s. SALT 1 was scheduled to expire in October 1977, and both countries wanted to finalise a new, more permanent and more encompassing agreement before the expiration date. The talks for a new agreement, known as SALT 2, began in 1972 and continued for 7 years. SALT 2 focused on limiting and reducing the number of multiple independently targeted re-entry vehicles, or MIRVs, and other strategic nuclear weapons. The negotiations faced challenges due to differences in strategic forces and new technologies. In other words, the USA had significantly more and a more advanced arsenal of nuclear weapons, and as a result, the USSR were just unwilling to reduce their weapons. However, the talks were successful in setting a limit of about 2,400 strategic nuclear delivery vehicles, SNDVs, for each side, including missiles and bombers. It also included a limit on MIRV systems and a ban on land-based missile launchers. The SALT II agreement was signed by President Jimmy Carter and Leonid Brezhnev in June 1979. However, all attempts at a lasting peace failed in November 1979 when the US Embassy in Iran was captured by Muslim fundamentalists. This event created fear and anger against foreigners in the United States. Then, in December the same year, the USSR invaded Afghanistan, and any further attempts at talks were abandoned. The SALT II treaty was never ratified by the US Senate, and it expired in 1985. It is surprising, though, to note that despite its expiration, both the US and the Soviet Union still continued to try to follow its terms. Okay, that's everything you need to know about the period of détente in the 1970s. If you liked this video, it would be fantastic if you could leave me a like below and even a comment or two. Don't forget to subscribe for more GCSE content and head over to my website for revision materials and worksheets. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.